Shana Francesca is an individual who has survived being raped, being groomed by the Evangelical Church, among many other pearl-clutching atrocities, y'all. Shana has risen up from the ashes to become a saver of lives by helping people out of whatever darkness they have found themselves in. This amazing woman is a keynote speaker. She's a consultant. She's appeared in over 100 podcast episodes. Hear a bit of what Shana has to say.
The first time I was raped, I was 3. It was by my babysitter's son. At the age of 12, my father forced me to take a chastity pledge in front of my 2,000-person church. My client became aware that his husband was dosing him with date rape drug in his food, and then was pumping him full of drugs until he nearly died, and then was resuscitating him. So I show up, and the client opens the door, and I see what's behind him in his house. And I just looked at him and I said, "Do you need a hug? Are you okay?" And he was like, "I'm not okay, and I do need a hug."
Thank you so much for watching and listening. Please enjoy the show. Hello, you beautiful, sweet, delectable, and mindful people out there, and welcome back to the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast. I have with me the lovely, beautiful, talented, creative, powerful, triumphant, and overcoming Shana Francesca with me today. How are you, my lovely?
I am good. How are you?
Fan-fucking-tabulous. It is today as we're recording. This is Friday, May 19th at about 10:08 in the morning. Who knows when this will come out? Maybe like another month or two, but this is what's happening right now. Y'all, Shana Francesca is a speaker, writer, and entrepreneur. Shana has been interviewed on more than 60 podcasts worldwide and has been published in Medium, Authority, Magazine, and Shoutout LA. I love Shoutout LA. Los Angeles is my home. Happy to see you, a worldwide girl. Yes. An Emotional Intelligence magazine. She helps people live more joyful and connected lives through the principles of life design. She's going to tell us what that is. Shana believes that our present and our future are transformed when we infuse our lives with intention, y'all. We design our lives and realize the power in accepting ourselves as the author of our story. Talking about taking your power back.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to get right into this with you. So in order for you to have this whole mindset about designing your lives and living with intention, was there ever a time in your life where you felt like you did not live with intention?
Oh, for sure. I was born into an abusive household. 2 parents who, only a few years after I was born, joined Evangelical Christianity and then began getting involved in ever more fundamentalist. Oh, sip of water. Hold on. Better. Fundamentalist sects of Evangelical Christianity. And that kind of drove the abuse into a overdrive. When you grow up in an abusive environment, and then so your home environment is so volatile, and then your external environment is also so volatile. So I went to the school associated with the church we grew up in. I went to church twice every Sunday, Wednesday nights, sometimes Thursday nights. So like my entire life was now encompassed within the church, the evangelical church, and purity culture, and that very strict religious environment. And then my home environment was not only strict, it was abusive. So there was no place in my life really for any significant amount of time in which I was able to explore, understand, to show up as myself, or to even know what that felt like for any significant period of time. And so like running through the woods and using my imagination became the only real times in my life where I could show up as who I wanted to be. But even that became distorted, right? Because like so much of your life is encompassed by abuse. And so I really, truly, I know in the deepest part of me, that's what led to my work now, because I deeply understand and know what it feels like to not be allowed to be your authentic self and to know that caged bird feeling. Um, and that it shows up as a spectrum, right? It's not like you are 100% able to be like, I don't know anybody who's really 100% able to be themselves and grow up in America. And I don't know anyone who, doesn't find some way in their life to show up in some way, allow some part of themselves to go out. But, depending on how we've grown up, depending on where we are in our life right now, depending on who we're required to spend time with, depends on how authentically we feel like we can show up for ourselves.
Mm. I believe it was Maya Angelou who wrote, "I Know Why the Caged Bird Sings."
One of my favorite books.
On the cover of the free book I have on my website, Don't Call Me a Christian, I intentionally put a bird in a cage with a door open to it, but the bird is still sitting in the cage, in order to represent the it's like religion in this country is a prison, but the door is open and you can leave anytime you want, but yet people sit there because the prison is in the mind.
Mhm.
And it's absolutely, pun intended, mind-boggling to me
Yeah.
that, that so many people walk around free, physically free, but they're in prison in their mind and in their hearts, and yet there's people in prison who have
Mhm.
a greater sense of freedom,
Mhm.
cannot physically come and go as they please, because happiness is a state of mind more than
Mhm.
anything. That's why we have millionaires who have everything who go and kill themselves, because happiness is a state of
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
Um, religious trauma, religious trauma, religious trauma, religious trauma. I'm waiting for them to add this shit to the DSM.
Oh, yeah.
Like it
I think it's not far away. It's not far away.
needs to be in the DSM, y'all, is the diastolics. What the fuck ever
Diagnostic somethings with an M, with an S and then an M.
manual. I know M stands for manual. And and what it shit, let me just
It's what like psychologists and therapists use for
mm,
understanding the ways in which their clients show up and how to guide them through the therapeutic and, medicinal process.
right. I just
That's
looked
my very layman term use
Yeah,
description.
I just oh, that was a great description. I love that out of it. I just looked it up, so I'm gonna read it to you. So one day when I get like a syndicated show and I have producers and everything behind,
Yeah.
I won't need to do this. So networks out there do call me. I am ready. But in the meantime, it stands for the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. We're currently on the fifth edition that came out in 2013. And this basically in the psychological health world is not considered a real issue until it makes it in here after it's been scholarly reviewed, though you already can look around and see when shit's fucked.
Mhm.
You don't need a whole scholarly team of doctors or what the fuck ever to tell us when some shit's fucked up, which we already know. Religious trauma
Right.
is real.
Mhm.
So y'all need to get with the motherfucking program. But I did that whole thing, church all day on Sunday, there Saturday night, Monday night prayer, Wednesday night another service, Tuesday night, it's something every day.
Yep.
I think some of that was born, especially in the South, in like the black churches where, my ancestors could not go to white churches and things like that. And they were coming through a lot, trying to come up out of slavery and trying to get through all that. I think that for their time, that that much church is exactly what they needed.
Yes.
But
Because it was community. It was community.
it was community, it was safety, it was affirmation for them.
Yeah. It
It
was understanding. It was personal choice. It was reclamation of self. I think the foundations of the Black church are very different than the foundations of white church in America.
Right. Um, I wish that the black church could have transitioned more into like the modern day where people have more electronics, they have more things going on. We don't need to be in church 7 nights a week. We don't have their same struggle, so we don't need that same thing. I'm curious, you said that you were in the feeling of abuse and a strict household. Can you get either from the church or from your household, can you give like a specific example of what happened? So like for me, and you don't have to if you don't want to,
Sure.
for For me, it was like getting kicked out of church for not being straight. They
Mm,
called me a pedophile just because they found out I was hanging out in the gay district of Houston.
mm,
Brought no boys up to the church, no rainbow flags. I wasn't rocking a rainbow colored beard during those times. I had a clean
mm.
shaven face. It was a fear mongering, prejudice, hateful thing. That is my example of the worst religious trauma. What is your
Yeah. Um, I mean, first of all, we know that it isn't the LGBTQIA community perpetrating harm against children, specifically in the religious community. We know for a fact, statistically, it is cishet white men within the church.
right? It is.
This year, I think only one person, part of the LGBTQIA community, has been arrested for anything involving minors. The rest of them were specifically religious and political leaders, and white men predominantly, like 90%, like 95%. It's insanity. So I just wanted to provide that clarity for anyone listening because uh, the world would have us believe a lot of things that are not true. Um, Second, for me, the church was the original groomer, specifically for women, right? The church, well, I think the church also grooms mm, young boys as well. And for the purposes of the church, I'm speaking in binary terms, even though I know that people exist outside of that binary, but simply for the purpose of discussing the church, I'm going to keep with that binary. Young boys are raised in specific ways to control and to be in control and to be submitted to. And they are the reflection of God on earth. They are the head of the household the way Christ looks the church, so on and so forth. And so there's this direct correlation created between maleness and godness. And then the church grooms women to submit themselves to that godness. Um, in my estimation, is a groomer. That very idea system is grooming women, young girls. And so it wasn't a stretch when, so trigger warning for anyone listening before I dive into this. My story, I'm not going to go into particular detail too much because I think that's unnecessary, but I am going to talk about things that touch on physical violence, sexual assault, and rape. So if that's sensitive to you, you might want to skip ahead in the conversation a few minutes. The first time I was raped, I was 3. It was by my babysitter's son. Um, as soon as my parents found out, they took appropriate steps, removed me from that environment, got me therapy. It was actually before they joined the evangelical church, right? And so I want to contrast those two experiences. Just about a year or so later, my parents joined the evangelical church and things started shifting. Within a few years, my father started grooming me. I didn't know it at the time. I do know it now looking back. At the age of 12, my father forced me to take a chastity pledge in front of my 2,000-person church. The church never approached me to ask me, no leader approached to ask me if this is what something I wanted to do. My father submitted that this is what's going to happen to the church leadership. And no one ever asked me if I wanted this to happen. It was simply assumed that because my father wanted it to happen, he was speaking for me. And the reason why I didn't want it to happen is when you look at purity culture, it's about virginity. And technically speaking, I was not a virgin. I had been raped at 3 years old. I no longer had a hymen, which is the testament of virginity. Do I believe in virginity anymore? No. Do hymens exist? Not medically, they do not. Not really. Not everyone has one. Not everyone's born with who has a uterus. So I did not want to take this chastity pledge in front of my 2,000 person church because technically I did not consider myself a virgin. And it was very traumatizing for me to declare this in front of a group of people who had no real right to my private information. I was willing to take the pledge, but I wanted to do it with my family only. But that was refused. That option was refused me. Funny enough, though, my sister was able to do that 2 years later. She was able to do it privately. This is irrelevant to the story. This is relevant to the story because 3 years later, my father tried to rape my father sexually. He succeeded in sexually assaulting me, but I did get away. I ran away. And I did not tell people for 3 years. So no one knew except my little sister, but no one knew for quite a while. And my little sister, I only told her about a year later because my relationship with my father obviously became extremely volatile. And while on vacation at a Christian retreat, he was trying to control me because he saw the boy flirting with me and got very possessive. And I told him to go fuck himself, quite literally out loud. I was 15 years old, and my sister was like, "You can't talk to dad that way." And I said, "Yes, the fuck I can. He tried to rape me." And should I have said that to my younger sister? No, but I was 15 and I was a fire breathing dragon and I was fucking hurt and I had no support in that. And the thing is that the reality is it's so telling that as a 15-year-old girl, I felt no support and there was no one in my life that I felt I could go to and had the right to feel wrong about what had happened and to gain support and the safety that I needed to get away from my father. When the church was made aware 3 years later, when I told my mother and the church was made aware, the church did absolutely nothing to hold my father accountable. I think they removed him from some volunteering he was doing, but there was no reporting it to the authorities. There was no supporting me and providing me the safety that I needed to get away from him. There was none of that. As a matter of fact, they just asked me to write him a letter and said they would give it to him, except they never gave it to him. So some pastor somewhere has a detailed description of how I feel about my father sexually assaulting me. There was other instances inside of the church of lack of accountability, of them being told about abuse that was happening. There was a father that we knew in detail that he was beating his children to the point that he was knocking them to the ground and kicking them once they were trying to protect themselves on the ground. This was made aware to the church. The mother tried to go to the police. The church told them that if they went to the police, they would be ousted from the community. When my church was made aware and my father admitted what he did to me, they told my mother that it occurred because she was not fucking my father nearly enough and that perhaps I had flirted with my father
Mm.
and that she should have been a better wife and then he wouldn't have turned to me in a moment of weakness. And so when I say that it's religious trauma, I actively mean that the church participated in not only perpetuating harm, but perpetuating the power and the ability for men to continue to harm by not being a part of a system of accountability and by not supporting victims and instead victim blaming.
Well, what I want to say is this. First of all, I'm glad you were able to pull strength out of all of that happened to you. Okay. I'm glad you're able to pull refinement. I'm glad it was able to build your character and to make you the incredible and strong, beaming and shining human who I have the pleasure of conversing with on this day. It didn't happen now, and we may spend a lifetime healing and dealing with some things, but we bear the fruits of the things that people did to us when we're able to let it go, tend
Yeah,
to it, and be determined to make something good come out of it. That way they don't keep the victory over us.
right. Yeah. Unfortunately, I do think that trauma separates us from our most powerful soul.
Mhm.
But in healing that trauma, we can become a more powerful version. Unfortunately, so many people do not have the support they need to be able to reconnect to self, right? To heal that trauma and reconnect to self. And so, I want to say to all of the people who are out there, I hope that this podcast in some way helps to support you in your own healing, wherever you are in that.
And also they have your coaching services and everything that's available on your website on Concinnate, which we're going to talk about next.
Uh-huh.
Now that you've given us the pathway that led you down this path, we're going to talk about what Shana can actually do for you all.
Yeah.
Before we get on to that, and like I said at the beginning, she's going to tell us what life design is. I just want to say that your church sounded the church that you used to be a part of sounds like super Catholic, in the way that they kind of like pretend sexual abuse isn't happening. I've heard of this happening to women in other churches, though. Unfortunately, as they say, what absolute power corrupts absolutely,
Absolutely.
absolutely, and so um the same way that, the church threw me out or they treated you this way, people who are unchecked, you know, just just have a way of just making shit up as they go and feeling like there's not going to be any accountability.
because there isn't
Right. Well, not yet, but as the Bible says,
coming.
when the Lord wakes up from his slumber as though he's been sleeping, he will come down here and enter into judgment with people who have been getting away with shit for far too long. It's just all things in its time. Um, I have a problem with people who have kids, and it's almost like they just wanted to create little weak beings that they can dominate and control. I really feel like people have children a lot of times, or most of the time, or some of the times, or
For
whatever.
selfish reasons.
Yeah, I was gonna say that for selfish reasons, and it's not about the kid. You're having a child for you, to make you feel better, to make you feel happy. Jesus actually said to mourn when someone's born and to rejoice when they die. It's the reverse. Reason I will not have a biological child. In another 10 years, I'm gonna go down to the store and buy me one. I'll probably be getting one off of Amazon by then, and I'm gonna get me I'm gonna adopt the kid who's already here and in the midst of all of this shit and help them. I'm not gonna create new life in this chaos.
Yeah.
So, her website is,
Concinnate.world.
Concinnate.world. I don't know why the
Yeah.
fuck I struggle saying that. For those
Okay.
For those of you who've never heard the word consonate before, I think it's so pretty. It almost sounds like pollinate, but not really. And it's spring, and I got my flowers and shit planted in the back. So it says the definition from dictionary.com says to arrange or blend together skillfully as parts or elements put together in a harmonious, precisely appropriate, or elegant manner. And yes, Shana's on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all that will go in the showy notes as it always does.
Mhm.
So talk to us about this life design. Tell us what consonate.world is. What do you do?
So my work centers around intentional living and leadership. So for me, life design is intentional living. And what does that mean? So I've distilled it down to a formula, right? And why a formula? I don't know. It just works. I was on a podcast where one of the hosts is a finance guy and he proposed we create it as a formula. And the formula we came up with was okay, but I've kept refining it. And so I've gotten it to the place where it is. And who remembers PEMDAS, parentheses, exponents, multiplication, division, something and subtraction. Anyway, point is, so it's be curious plus be respectful in parentheses times practicing accountability equals intentional living and leadership, right? So for me, intentional living is life design and intentional living leadership falls right alongside of it. It's about it could because wrapped up about being curious, about being respectful, about practicing accountability. All those things happen together. They're woven together. It's not like be curious, then be respectful, then practice accountability. They're all happening at the same time. They're all holding each other. They're all growing together like an ecosystem. And I love National Geographic's definition of an ecosystem. It's long, but it ends with like a bubble of, right? And so being a leader is being like guardian of and to help to foster a bubble of life, right? And to do that, we have to stay in a place of curiosity rather than expert. The minute that we put ourselves in a position of expert is the minute that we are no longer able to truly learn and to challenge our frame of reference and to understand that our particular worldview is very narrow and specific, right? That's where curiosity comes in. Getting like, and I talk about in my workshops, I have a couple of coming up in June and July, depending on when this comes out. People can register for those. Um, I talk about specifically the fact that we can create curiosity practices, and it has to start with things that are really accessible. And who we are in private bleeds into who we are in public. So there's a direct correlation to designing our lives and being a great leader. Being intentional in our private life and being intentional as a leader. And one of my favorite things to do when practicing curiosity is to do curiosity walk. And that could be something in nature, or it could be in your business, right? Walk around and connect to something new, someone. talk to them, get to know them, dive in, right? Do some follow-up research, really invest in the world around you and understanding your part in it and the part that other people play, right? So that you can decenter yourself. Second is being respectful. Being curious without respect is intrusive, right? Just walking up to someone's face and not having earned their respect or their trust and asking and demanding their story and think you're owed it, their story, their time. That is intrusive, right? So we have to couple curiosity with respect. And then all of that is multiplied and made more powerful by practicing accountability. And practicing accountability really is a fundamental part of my work because I saw what lack of accountability does. It takes a group of people who are supposed to be coming together for the purpose of spiritual growth and turns it into a cult, right? When there's lack of accountability, when there is a godlike uh, reverence, respect, I don't know what you call it. There's godlike reverence where people become sacrosanct is where you slip from a group of people together for spiritual growth to cult, right? And that's what I experienced, evangelical Christian cult. So practicing accountability is a deep and important part of my work. And I tell people consistently that the group of people that surround you has to be very different than how you grew up. It needs to be as diverse as the world you live in, right? It needs to be diverse in ethnic background, race, gender, belief systems, and neurodiversity is deeply important in that as well. The thing that you must agree on, right? That everyone who surrounds you and you are held accountable by, the thing that you must all agree on is basic human rights for all people, bodily autonomy for all people. You must recognize and understand that no being should be objectified or dehumanized. That must be the basis of understanding the people that you surround yourself with, right? But practicing accountability with a diverse array of people around you is deeply necessary and important. So that's my work. That's what I do.
Okay. That's quite a that's quite a spectrum that you have. So let's get more granular with it. So y'all, if you go to her website, which is a beautiful website, there's like life design services offered, and I love the price range on them. I saw as low as $40. It looks like it was like for a
Workshop. Yeah.
45-minute session with you over Zoom. There's group counseling sessions too. Then there's like the executive sessions. Her group sessions go for, I think, 3 months. How often do people meet for those 3 months?
We meet once a week for 4 weeks out of the month. So it's a 5-week month. We're only meeting 4 of those 5 weeks. So we meet 12 times over 3 months. Yeah.
12 times
Yep.
over 3 months. And the price range on that was like 450. I saw.
Yeah. I think it's at 600 now, but it's still pretty affordable.
Right, because some of the other people who I've talked to, I've come across, I've seen like $200-300 for 1 hour, with certain people out there,
Yep.
I guess, who consider themselves experts or whatever, what you were saying. I've never really heard anyone disavow that term, but I love the way that you did it, since it does imply like a cessation of learning, you
Hmm.
you reach that level.
Yeah.
So on your website, you also have, because in your history, you also have an interior design
Hmm.
degree.
Yep.
And on your website, you show examples of like from small to extra large design space. How
Yeah.
does Is that a service you still offer, and how does that infuse into what you do?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So, yes, my background is in interior design. And yes, I offer an array of options for people to connect with me, to learn from me, from group workshops to group coaching and yes, my private coaching, one on one coaching is $300 an hour. But I insist on, yeah, that's private one on one, right? But that's, you know, that's something where, I insist on having group coaching that's way more affordable. And I insist on having workshops that are even more affordable because I believe in democratization of information, right? And so I believe in giving people access to the information in ways that are palatable, accessible for them while still honoring my own work and you know, my own wisdom, right? But yes, interior design is still an aspect of my work. I don't take on nearly as many clients But there's always been a deep element to the way that I approached interior design. There's always been this very psychological aspect of recognizing that our physical environments are oftentimes reflections of our beliefs about ourselves. They are vision boards for our life, want them to be, and if we accept them as such, right? We spend 2/3 of our life inside of our home. We spend about, a good portion of the other third of our life in our office buildings or office spaces, right? And so it's really important that we recognize the mental toll that those spaces take on us if they are not representative, if they are not benefiting us, if they are not supporting us rather than us supporting them, right? And what do I mean by that? I mean that our physical environment should be a reflection of our authentic self and not a function of marketing, not what we saw on HGTV, not what someone else did with their home via Pinterest. It doesn't mean we can't take elements of the things that we see and incorporate them, but we should be asking ourselves, is this tied to who I really am and how I want to be seen and how I feel in this world? Does this energetically connect to who I really am? As opposed to, I like it and it's pretty. We can think that something is beautiful and not need to own it. I want people to sit with that for a minute, right? We can know something to be beautiful and we can appreciate it outside of the energy of our direct circle, right? I love the Mona Lisa. I think it's beautiful, but does it hang in my house? Does a print of it hang in my house? Do I interact with it on a regular basis? No. Right? There are beautiful buildings that I appreciate. I don't need to have them. So much of our culture teaches us if we like it, we should have it. Right. And that doesn't necessarily have a direct correlation. It can, but it does not have to. And I think we have to check and see and recognize that every single thing in our lives is made of energy. Literally, physics tells us we are all made of energy. And so we need to ask ourselves before we purchase something, before we use our money, which is an indication of how we have spent our time, the energy we've put into our time to get that money, right? And we ask ourselves whether or not we are going to spend that money on something. Does it energetically align with us first, right? Are we actually going to use it? Is it really necessary? Does it support who we actually are, right? And who we are becoming? And so that has always been an aspect of my work. And at some point in time, and I have incredible clients that I've worked with as an interior designer over the years, judges, lawyers, partners in firm, um, heads of medical departments at prestigious institutions. And one of them looked at me and he said, Shana, I tell everybody you're my life coach and my interior designer. And I was like, you do? Oh, so you get the coaching part. You are connected to it. I just didn't think that my clients really recognized it in the way that I wanted them to. And as soon as they did, it was like I gave myself permission to take on that in a more pervasive way because I can, through speaking to people this way, through podcasts, through I'm also a keynote speaker. I facilitate workshops. Through that, I can touch a heck of a lot more people than I can as strictly an interior designer. So yes, interior design is still part of my work because it's part of our lives, because it directly affects our mental health, but it is a much smaller portion of what I do now. I only take on 3 clients max, depending on the size of projects, um, because so much of my time is spent, speaking in front of people now.
Hmm. Well, that's very beautiful. So then, let me be clear. So on your website, the $40 options and the $60 ones, that's for like a group workshop sort of.
Correct.
Okay. Okay. So
Yep.
then, thank you for correcting me
Yep.
on that. So so you mentioned a couple of your clients. Can you give me an example of like, of course, that mentioned in their name, like a before and after, like a person came to you with this problem, you worked with them, and then these were the results.
Yeah, absolutely. So a client of mine was in a deeply abusive relationship for a long time. They had been together for 15 years. About 5 years in, things shifted. And and I think it was not soon after they got married. So um my client is the head of a medical department at a prestigious university. I mean, at a prestigious hospital. And his partner or husband was a, a, a pediatric nurse in the ER or something like that. He was a pediatric nurse. I don't remember if he was in the ER or not. Doesn't really matter. Point is that they both had, medical background. And At some point in time in the relationship, my client became aware that his husband was dosing him with date rape drug in his food and then was pumping him full of drugs until he nearly died and then was resuscitating him. I'm smiling and I'm laughing, but I'm laughing because it's cruel, not because it's funny. And when I was brought into the house after the husband had left, the abusive husband had been by court order removed from the house. Um, I didn't know all of that. I didn't know any of the story. I had just been called by a friend of mine who's a realtor, and he said, "Hey, I have this client, and I know it's you that needs to work with." And I was like, "Okay, great." So I show up, and the client opens the door, and I see what's behind him in his house. And I just looked at him and I said, "Do you need a hug? Are you okay?" And and he was like, "I'm not okay, and I do need a hug." And I knew this was going to be a tremendous labor of love and something I had never taken on before, but that's not unusual for me. I take on projects that challenge me the same way I ask other people to do it, right? Because if it doesn't challenge us, it's not changing us, we're not growing. There was furniture, clothing, everything you can imagine piled up in this house everywhere. It was not so much a hoarder situation. Maybe it was. I don't know. I'm not a psychiatrist. I can't diagnose someone, but it was a difficult situation. You could tell that there was definitely the physical environment was not okay. I had myself and a team of 7 people come in and clean out this house. It took us a day to clean out 1.5 floors of this 4-story house. There was drug paraphernalia everywhere. There was double and triple bolts and locks on doors, like padlocks on doors. There was chains coming down from the ceiling. There was drug paraphernalia, needle. I mean, we found dozens of needles, all kinds of drugs. And this was all by the husband who was forcibly removed. But the husband who was left, my client who was left in the house, it was emotionally and physically, he was not able to remove all of these things. It was too close to him. He had been abused by his husband to the point that, like, mentally he was not okay. And he could not go through this house and clean it out on his own. There was just no way. And so we went through, we cleaned it up, got the house painted, got the floors cleaned, got the whole house scrubbed top to bottom, donated what, got the drug paraphernalia out, took all the padlocks off, started to get that furniture placed in ways that felt really good, like a normal, house so that he could actually use it and interact. We got the dogs some help because he has 2 dogs and got them some help and got the backyard cleaned out for them. We addressed so many aspects of this house. And then within 6 months, he started dating again. He started having people over the house. He started telling me stories about how he was reconnecting with people in his life. He got the pool cleaned and set up so that he could have barbecues. He got, he got his life back. And I know this is an extreme example, and not every client, most clients I work with are not this extreme, but I have no problem taking on the extreme. I have no problem diving into the difficult parts of people's lives and helping them and empowering them to make sense of them and empowering them to live a healthier, better life because our physical environment is so deeply important. Once we cleaned out that house, it was like he was able to clean out his heart. He was able to let go of the demons and the ghosts that were trapped inside of that house. He was able to transmute that energy. We saged the house for him, got music playing, got things set up. You know what I mean? Like, we were able to help change the energy in that physical environment by changing the way the environment itself. We were able to reset that stage for him so that his home could be supportive and help him to foster the story that he wanted his life to tell moving forward.
Well, girl, we can just call you like
Well, wait, you cut out for a second. What'd you say?
I said, girl, we could just go ahead and call you the exorcist,
Right.
kicking demon ass and such. And so, so that is a super, super powerful example. But it also goes back to what I was saying earlier, how like happiness is a state of mind. If he had a 4-story house and all of this, then he's clearly wasn't, broke, you know? And so, but nevertheless, he was unhappy. It sounds like, I wonder if that guy he was tied up with was a narcissist. Do you think?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, the ex-husband, is no longer with us. He ended up overdosing and smashing into a tree just a few months after I started working with my client. So, um, I'm losing control over his partner in that way, and me coming in and cleaning him out of that house sent him in a way that, I wish hadn't gone that direction.
Well, I'm gonna reiterate something. I released a show the other week when I was down in Mexico. I went down there to do some psychedelics, try to heal from the 5 years I spent with, my narcissistic ex-boyfriend. I began to emerge into a pattern of forgiveness and looking at him with pity. And so I thought, and I released this episode. I went and researched ways that people with narcissistic personality disorder can actually fix, repair, heal, whatever the fuck they
Yeah,
want. Bitch, you stop doing the evil shit you're doing and actually start enjoying your life. So
yeah,
I did a whole episode. And like my emotions, like on some days I'm like praying to God to help them, and on some days I'm praying to God to smite them.
mhm,
But I'm like, how could, because they're people, but they're so fucking evil. It's just like,
yeah,
I really toe the line back and forth. Yeah, but
yeah,
whole episode pretty much dedicated to warning them that their ways are going to catch up with them if they don't stop.
yeah,
You all still have a chance to turn around. As long as you were breathing, you can start all over again. I quote that Dave Cobb song all the time.
yeah.
And so it's unfortunate that he met a bitter end.
It is.
I was thinking before we got on this show about Judas and Jesus in the traditional Christian Bible. You know, the way, the level of deception, that Judas has to have be able to smile in Jesus's face every day, knowing what he was plotting behind his back,
Uh,
knowing that he was really trying to hurt him, but
yeah,
hadn't done him anything wrong. I'm saying this now to switch gears to not to encourage the narcissistic people, but to encourage the people who have suffered at their hands. You know, God used Judas to to ultimately bring Jesus into his purpose. Now, what Judas did to Jesus caused him to be crucified, so he went down, but he also got back up. And unfortunately, in this story too, Judas meets a tragic end. Too. So again, there's your warning, narcissistic people. But for those who have suffered, baby, you can. I know when you've gone through that, you don't know who you are, and you feel like you have died, but there is resurrection power available to you.
yeah,
You might need, Shauna to come in. You might need to have a conversation with her. Things may need to change. Um, I know when I went through it, everything went down. My finances suffered. I had to file bankruptcy because I wasn't there to tend to my businesses. My home got all dirty and shit. Everything, can come undone depending on
yeah,
your state of mind.
yes.
And it's difficult to come up out of a narcissistically abusive situation by yourself. I needed all
You
kinds
can't.
of this. And so
Yeah, you really can't.
I'm happy to see that your work was able to help somebody who was a clear victim of narcissistic abuse to come up out of that.
Yeah, I think the thing is that we are taught so much in a society to pull ourselves up by our bootstraps, but we are not meant to do this life alone. We are meant to live in community with one another. We are meant to do this as community. We are meant to live as an ecosystem. The earth is an ecosystem. We Community is a is a sub ecosystem, right? It is an ecosystem of itself within another ecosystem, right? When we recognize that we are meant to live in community with one another, there is no need to be self-conscious. There is no need to be insecure. Why? Because you don't need to be all the things. You know that you aren't meant to be all the things. You powerfully embrace who you are and what you are meant to be. And you know that other people come alongside you and that they have their own strengths and that your strengths and their strengths are complementary. I don't really believe in weaknesses. I believe that what we are not strong in is because someone else is. that we are meant to do this life together. In an ecosystem, there is no homogeneity, right? There is not a whole bunch of things doing the exact same thing. You have all different elements working together, right? Complementing each other, right? And so that's the thing, is that we have to recognize that we are powerful all by ourselves. We do not need to have power over others. Power over others is a weird concept. We are meant to live in community together. And especially when we're going through healing, a deep part of our healing is recognizing the ways in which we are not living in community together, and we need to form community around ourselves. And if you want a great resource on that, Mia Birdsong's book, How We Show Up, is an incredible book about community and specifically about the queering of relationship, which I love the way that she describes that, of this stepping outside of this heteronormative understanding of the world that we currently exist in.
Speaking of, in, speaking of, in, speaking of insecurity and things like that, when we had met before to kind of do a little chit chat before, actually doing the actual interview we're doing today, you had made offered a perspective that you see this sort of problem like in men more, and I took a note because society stifles emotion, which breeds lack of empathy and lack of accountability.
Yeah.
Do you care to explain how you come up with that or what you've seen?
Wait, say that one more time.
Is
I want
that
to take that in.
we were talking about narcissism, insecurity, the need for validation, and all of the weaknesses like that. And you were saying you see it more in men because society stifles emotion, which breeds a lack of empathy and lack of accountability.
Yeah, I see that men are raised in a way which dehumanizes them, right? Which requires men to abandon connection to their emotions, because all human beings feel all things. We all feel the same range of emotions. It's just that men are disallowed from actually connecting to their emotions, working through them. They become stagnated, they become bottled up, right? Because you're not allowed to express them. You're not allowed to show them. You're not allowed to actually feel your feelings in that way. And anger becomes the primary expression of all emotion. And then, you know, by doing so, by being disconnected from your emotions, how can you honor other people who are connected to their emotions, right? You see someone else expressing their full range of emotions, and there's this anger because they are and you aren't. And there's this disconnect because you don't understand, right? Because you haven't been allowed to feel your feelings. You haven't been allowed to explore what self regulation looks like for those feelings. All these things lead to know, men not being able to show up as full human beings and be truly connected to each other, to their partners, to their family members, so on and so forth, right? And so, you know, I know that a huge part of my work is, you know, connecting with and empowering men to recognize that they have to feel their feelings, and to hold space for that, right? Because I think, especially some women, but I think this has changed for many women, but there's still some women who aren't used to men expressing emotions and also expect a certain level of emotional intelligence when it comes to expressing emotion that men don't have because they haven't been practicing expressing their emotions the way that we have since we were children, like people raised as girls. Um, and so, you know, there's this deep interconnection of men needing to learn and not expecting the free labor of people raised as women, uh, but also creating space for themselves and each other to learn emotional intelligence and to be able to show up as partners um, and to embrace their own humanity so that they can embrace each other's and be true part of community and no longer feel like they've got to be just a large private part. I can say bad words on here. Have a large penis, a large bank account. That's it, right? Like you get to show up and need to show up as whole human beings, because just having a large bank account and a large penis isn't cutting it anymore, right? And as somebody who is heterosexual, I want to be in a relationship with a man. I just can't, because there are so few men who are actually healthy enough to contribute to my life. Because if you aren't contributing to my life in an equal way that I'm contributing to yours, and you aren't allowed in my life, period. Right. Other than professionally, which you could pay me to help you.
But I know all of that is right. Um, my God, boys, boys, boys. Like the woman is saying, you're more than a bicep and a hard dick. Um, Pay attention to the voices in your head where you're learning this information from. I encourage you to put that damn phone down. Get
Mhm.
off social media. Stop, stop, because everything that you do imprints upon your subconscious and your conscious mind.
Yeah.
You think it does or not. In my
Mhm.
relationship, my ex-boyfriend was so insecure.
Yeah.
And he was a trim dude, used to run track and everything. I thought he was fine as fuck, but that never changed anything because in his head, he would compare himself to other men. And I'm like, maybe you should stop looking at hot guys on Instagram reels if you're dealing with insecurity. That's not going to help you, but he would never listen to me. And don't let yourself get caught in a psychological loop. These negative neural pathways. A neural pathway is basically you running on autopilot and not realizing you're running on autopilot. And you're
Yeah.
doing it on autopilot that is hurting you. So, Shana and I invite you to meet yourself for the first time, perhaps
Yeah.
mind, body, soul, spirit, as you were created and designed to be.
Yeah.
You're learning how to be a human. You can't learn that from necessarily other humans. You have to gain your spiritual sense of self, your
Yeah.
psychological sense of self. And if you deny any part of you, you will be out of balance and then you'll never
Yeah.
be. Masculinity and manhood is not about performance. It's not about proving yourself. It's about telling the truth, being faithful to the people around you, being
Being
responsible,
consistent.
being consistent, being accountable, saying you're sorry when you're wrong and not feeling like there's a problem doing it. Now that is real manhood. Not
Mhm.
pounding pussies and assholes and mouths, not coming all over town and squirting semen every goddamn where and lifting all the fucking weights you can. Okay, this is not Popeye the damn sailor. This is not WWF. This is not none of that bullshit. This is real fucking life. And we need you men to actually show up.
Yeah. Because we need you. That's the thing. We need you and we want you. We crave your presence in the world. This is an ecosystem that you are part of and you have taken yourself out of it. We need you. I need you to hear me when I say that. We need you, not who the world has told you you should show up as, but we need the actual you. We desperately need you. And we are begging you to be you, but you don't know how. You don't have the tools, and you can't listen to other unhealthy men who are just reinforcing your very specific perspective on the world who are also not showing up. You can't ask other unhealthy people how to be healthy, right? You can't ask that. We need you. So I'm going to say whether you hire me or don't hire me, whether you just buy the books that I recommend or whatever it is, please please find a way to stop watching all the things that you're watching because the algorithms know what you want to see. They're going to keep showing you the same feedback loops. I need you to pick up a book. I need you to start with something. Start with bell hooks. Start with the will to change. Start with all about love from bell hooks. Start with something. Start with Mia Birdsong's How We Show Up. Start with anything that takes you out of your specific frame of reference and calls you into your humanity and calls you into a place of community and calls you into your actual power and empowers you to show up because we need you. We aren't trying to move forward without you. You're forcing us to. You're forcing us to.
Yeah, it feels like you were right in the middle of my last relationship. But, like, the way you just described that, I hated leaving him. You know, after 5 years, I wanted like you said, I wanted him. I didn't want what he could do for me.
Yes.
I didn't want how good he was in the bedroom. I didn't want I
Yeah.
wanted I didn't want
Um,
him to perform. I wanted him. I looked over every flaw he had because
yeah.
I wanted him. It wasn't about what he could do or how he looked or didn't look. I just wanted him.
Yeah.
I desperately wanted him, but I had to let him go, and I hated doing it. So we will leave you if we have to. And
Yeah.
boys, don't get it twisted. And like you said, I'm single too because of the same reason. And I realized I like nice things. I like the very best. And if I want the very best in a male in this day and time, that means I'm going to have to fucking wait for it. But the more expensive something is and the more costly, the less of them they make. And so
Yeah.
you can go out and get a cheap Walmart man any day or just find someone to fool around with. But we're not about that life because we've elevated our existence over here.
Yeah. But there doesn't need to be any Walmart men. There doesn't need to be, right? It's a choice. It's a choice. You get to choose who you are and how you show up. So elevate, show up. We need you.
Elevate, hire this woman I recommended, and she's a female, but that doesn't mean that she cannot speak to males. Is it because feminine energy is a large part of growing masculine energy, and that's the way it goes. Um, take that mindset you have, boys, about going to see a massage therapist. I'm a licensed massage therapist. Some of you will not allow a male to work on you. You only want a female to work on you. I get it, whatever. Look at it the same way. She can upgrade you. So I'm gonna put let's lighten it up a bit with my dad jokes.
Yes.
The new
I'm
set,
excited about this part.
yeah, we just have a couple of minutes left, y'all. And thank you so much for staying over the hour. We just have a few minutes left, and so the new thing I'm doing at the end of my interviews is dad jokes. I just think is a great way to lighten it up because the content of the Sex, Drugs, and Jesus podcast is only going to get heavier and more intense as the years spin on. So, dad joke number one:
Yes.
why did the electrician plant light bulbs?
I don't know. Why?
Because he wanted to grow a power plant.
Oh, that was I should have gotten that one. Okay. Okay.
Dad,
That
dad joke numero dos: why did Karen, yes, that Karen, press Control Alt Delete?
she wanted the manager.
Pretty much, she wanted to see the task manager.
Yeah.
You got one. One for
I got one. Nailed it.
okay. Last one. What do you call? Oh, and the majority of these are coming from BuzzFeed.com, by the way. Quote my source. What do you call a cow in an earthquake?
I'm a milkshake.
Yeah, you got it. Hell, yeah. 2 for 3.
Nice.
You've done
Nailed
better than anyone else that I've asked. Although I think this is like the second or third time I've done this, but I have a feeling that your numbers are going to stay high.
it.
But this lets me know that you have a relaxed enough mind and that you have enough humor in you and a joyous, colorful way of looking at life that you're able to get 2 out of 3 dad jokes. Dad jokes are the litmus test at how seriously someone takes themselves, and you scored high today.
Yeah, I don't take myself that seriously. If you do, then you fall into expert. And that's no fun.
No fun. Now you have to wear a
No
suit and
fun.
tie and everything. Can have your titties out. Oh, nobody wants.
Right.
So, did you have any jokes to contribute? You don't have to.
I don't.
Okay.
I
No problem
don't.
at all. So, any last words for the world? Any encouragement? Anything you'd like to say?
Yeah.
Get out.
Just get curious. Make a practice of it. Come across something new and hold space for it. Dive in and get to know it, right? Because the more that we get to know the world around us, the more we get to know ourselves. And the more we get to take up space beautifully and intentionally in this world and create space for others to do the same, right? Because we know what belongs to us and what is meant for us and what isn't. And what isn't meant for us is meant for someone else. And so we stop taking over the space that isn't meant for us, and we empower others to take up that space.
Hmm. So beautiful. I hope y'all set in Shannon's words and let them seep into your soul and everything. We want to be in the right place at the right time and not in the wrong place where we're not supposed to be. Her website is Concinnate.world. I think that's a beautiful ending. No .net, no .com, Concinnate.world. It lets me know, like I said at the beginning, you're a global woman. She's on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, and all this will go in the show notes as it always does. Feel free to reach out to her and message her about her services, about her advice, me about these books that she's recommended. Pass this website along to that XY chromosome in your life who just seems like he's never going to grow up. But there will be no Peter Panning. There will be no Toys R Us kids because we need you, men. Thank you all for listening. The website is sexdrugsandjesus.com. Don't forget to donate. And I bless you all. And just remember that every little thing is going to be all right. Thank you for coming, Shana, girl.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you all so much for joining us today and for taking some time to invest into yourself and into the lives of your loved ones. Please visit us at sexdrugsandjesus.com and check out our resource page, our spiritual service offerings, my blog, my books, and other writings that God has partnered with me to create. Find us on any social media platform. Stay strong, my people, and just remember that everything is going to be all right.